Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Under the Hat. Super thrilled for this episode because I don't know if you all are ready for the swagger, for the energy, for the humbleness that comes with Frankie. So I'm joined today by Frankie Cilliers. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so I had to do like a rehearsal with Frankie. I'm like, do I got the name right? And so just a little bit of context here. So Frankie and I we met through work, and I showed up to the virtual office, right? And kind of like, oh, we got another team member, someone joining the team, and Frankie comes on camera, and within seconds, I'm like, oh, I love this human. So much passion, so much energy. And every time I talk with Frankie, I just learn something new. So before we get into it, Frankie, how are you? And thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me tonight. I'm doing well tonight, today, this morning, wherever you are tuning in from across the world. Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say, Steve, that the feeling is very mutual. Love your energy, love your vibe, love your different hats. And yes, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm doing good, by the way. I'm doing very good.
Yeah, we're just talking before we jumped on. We were talking about time zone difference, right? And so for Frankie, it is quite late, but apparently that's normal for Frankie. And so Frankie, it's what, 1 in the morning?
It's 1 a.m. in the morning, but this is usually my most creative time. So hopefully you're in for a treat.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it. Before we dive into stuff, just want to read. I know I don't always do this, but just want to read a little bit about Frankie. And so that way you all get a little bit of context. And I'm going to let him kind of unpack this for you. But, reading his bio, like Frankie is an award-winning ed tech trainer and is currently a teacher success champion at CAMI. Would like to hear that later. What is CAMI? And he is trained and spoken at events attended by guests from all over the world, including Dubai, San Diego, London, and more. Recently won the Mail and Guardian Top 200 award in the EdTech category, and was also featured on Newsroom Africa, a national news channel, for his innovative use of technology in education. Super impressive bio, Frankie. But for, maybe providing a little bit more context, like what got you into education, what brought you to CAMI, and just overall, like who is Frankie as a teacher, as an educator, and as a person?
Thanks, Steve. So I consider myself as a learning architect and a lifelong learner. So that's actually one of the 7 pillars of an effective educator, is believing in lifelong learning. So I've embraced lifelong learning from a young age. So initially, the idea was not to end up in education. I had a dream of being on stage. So I wanted to be in theater. And then I decided, well, what will give me an opportunity after I finished high school? I thought to myself, what would give me an opportunity to really inspire, empower, and uplift communities? And then I suddenly thought of education. And that was actually a bonus for me, because if you think about it, education is also being on the stage, like on a daily basis. We are in front of an audience. So we are on a stage, and we get to not only entertain our students and communities within education, but we also get an opportunity to really, really make a huge difference in the lives of our students. So that was always a big thing for me, was uplifting communities, empowering them, inspiring them through creativity, equipping them with problem-solving skills that they could use to thrive in an ever-changing future. As educators, we all know that the educational landscape is continuously evolving and continuously changing. A few years ago, it was coding and robotics. It's still coding and robotics, but it's more AI now. So it's constantly evolving. So it's embracing lifelong learning, keeping up with the latest trends, and then, of course, expanding your message and just expanding that message of empowerment. So that is, in short, how I ended up in education. Uh, Dream to uplift our communities. And that's a last thing I have to tell you this, Steve. So my dream in education actually started through cardboard models. So I used to go to our local library in the small town where I grew up in. And I used to read up about all the landmark buildings in Johannesburg, the city where I live in now. And I said, one day I'm going to live in Johannesburg. I'm going to live in the big city. I know it might sound a little bit cliche, but I told myself, I want to live in the big city and I want to make a huge difference in this big city. And then out of that cardboard dreams, my dream became a reality. And I ended up in Johannesburg. But that also made me realize one important thing, that it actually doesn't matter whether you live in a big city, whether you live in a small town. If you have that passion, that fire inside your heart to uplift and empower communities, you can do that wherever you are in the world. I mean, look now, we are like connected virtually, and we are talking about innovation. And that is the beauty of education, being able to embrace lifelong learning and empowering communities worldwide in this case.
Yeah, I just love that last part, Frankie, of like it doesn't matter where you are, right? And so I'm not in a large town at all, like super tiny. And for those that are listening, if you know California at all, we do have our little tiny towns, right? So little Escalon, California is the town that I live in. But Frankie, think about the amount of people that you and I talk to, connect with, build relationships with globally, right? And that has been made possible through the kinds and types of technologies that we now get to work with. I also love like your your whole your mindset about community and how important schools play in that role, right? And from an empowerment standpoint, from in just an educational standpoint, but also like that mentality of like we as teachers oftentimes we are like performers. Like we have a captivating audience, but sometimes when we're not engaging, there could be downfalls with that, right? And so for me in the classroom, that was always top of mind of like, how can I be engaging, not just with the technology and the instruction, but like as a person, right? And to me, I feel like Frankie, like you really thrive with that in the classroom, which does bring me to a question. And I maybe clarifying for me only, but Frankie, like what age did you teach? Like, did you come from the high school world? Did you teach younger grades? What did you teach?
So Steve, I initially studied to become a high school teacher, but for some reason I ended up in primary school. So in the school where I worked at last, I actually taught e-learning, so electronic learning, digital learning, to grade R, which is our elementary ages, right up to grade seventh grade students. But I also worked with universities. I did some extramural support in terms of technology for the local university where I studied at. I had a wonderful opportunity to go back to the university and empower the students through technology. And then I did a lot of community work as well. So in South Africa, we've got a lot of underprivileged communities. So being able to be in a position where you can go into those communities, and even if you just have one device available to you, that power and that impact that one device and that technology tool that you have on that particular device can make in those communities that really need the empowerment in terms of technology is really, really incredible. Yeah, so I taught primary school, I taught a little bit of high school, and then, of course, a lot of community work with students and high school students. So yeah, like you say, that's the beauty. And also another thing, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, that is also very, very cool, is the fact that how we use technology, like how you encourage engagement through the technology tool as well. So that's also very important. So I always say, like, we've got all these amazing tools to our disposal, these technological tools to our availability, but how you use it is the most important thing. The technology tool should not just become a substitute for traditional teaching. So when I think back to when I first started teaching, and my idea around technology was, okay, I've got a projector in the classroom. I take the textbook, and that is just a substitute, and that's not the correct way of doing it. The really powerful way to use it is really to equip people with skills to thrive in an ever-changing future, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love that. I
Mhm.
I I will say that doing a little bit of research on you, Frankie, like leading like my own preparation for this
Yes.
episode, kind of seeing your, and I already knew this as being a coworker, right? But just like your social media presence and how you come across, and like, you know, like even visiting your website and seeing the work that you're doing there, you do have, and hence the title of this episode is, you know, this importance, this value of a teacher brand. And it's an interesting topic that I don't know I always thought about when I was still in the classroom. I remember the first time I was listening to some other podcast years ago, and they had somebody on uh, that talked about teacher branding, and I was like, huh, I've never really thought about that, right? Like we live, because for years we lived in our, and I've spoken about this concept before on the show, but like we used to live in our box, right? In our classrooms and our four walls, and we're like stuck there like rats with our students. And like, you know, we don't really, it was hard for us to break free of those four walls, right? And so like when I first heard this concept of a teacher brand, I was like, wow, like we could be doing better for ourselves to market and connect with others in a more meaningful and also purposeful way. And it was also described as a way, and I don't know if you used it this way, but like allowing your students to feel your brand, see your brand, hear your brand, where like they know it's a Martinez assignment, right? They know like what different visuals, maybe audio things, like when they hear it, they know, they feel it, and they're able to respond to you a lot better. So I'm just curious, like, and we could go down the rabbit hole with this, I'm sure, Frankie. But so what is a teacher brand, and why pay attention to it? Why lean into it?
Thanks, Steve. So, a teacher brand is number one, your story that you tell is to the whole world, your story that you share. It is something that you are really passionate about. A lot of times, when people think of, or teachers think of a teacher brand, they think it is about the embracement, if that is a word. It's about embracing many different tools and many different things. But it's really finding something that you love, that you are really passionate about, something that can really make a meaningful and purposeful difference in the lives of many, and then sharing that in a way that is unique to you and that makes you stand out. So by sharing your teacher brand with the world, it comes down to the empowerment and the upliftment part. You get an opportunity to share that passion, that flame of innovation that's burning brightly inside of your heart with the whole world. So it's really about finding your niche, finding something that you are truly, truly passionate about in education, in this case, something that can really make a difference on a big scale. And then it's finding a way to communicate that to an audience that will really pay attention to what you are trying to say.
Yeah, no, you put it way better than I did, because I kind of described earlier, like kind of like what I experienced by this term years ago,
Mm,
and I don't know if I was successful with it, like while in the classroom. But to me, like what I loved hearing from you, Frankie, is like the story component of it. Like
Mm.
what story, what messaging are you wanting to share, and what's the impact? So like when you're so like seeing like your different, like your website, seeing you on YouTube, on X, what is the Frankie story? Like what is that message that you try to relay onto others?
I think it is definitely an element of humor. That's very important. So using your happiness and your sense of humor to make other people happy. So I think that's what my brand is about. It's about showcasing technology and showcasing technology tools in a humorous way, not necessarily very funny, but in a way that really makes people happy and that makes people want to explore with the message I'm trying to convey. So that is very, very valuable if you have the ability to communicate your passions to people in a unique way. And then the aim is, of course, to spread that happiness, to spread that love, and in a subconscious way, make people pay attention. So it's not so much about sharing online and showcasing very vividly, in a lot of cases, what the tool is about and what your message is, but it's really like adding that element of interest to what you are saying and then subconsciously encouraging people to take part. So I think, like my brand, if I have to explain it in one word, it's happiness. Well, maybe not one word, maybe we can use two words. It's happiness, and it is really, really about that uplifting part, coming back to the uplifting part, the empowering part. So that is what the Frankie brand is. It's creativity, it's laughter, it's happiness.
No, I love that. I love that. And it comes across so genuine, right? Like when
Thank you.
I go onto your website, I don't feel like, what's this guy selling me? Right. And cause like you go onto any website, even in the education
Hmm.
context, right? Like it always feels like, oh, what's what's this other thing that
Absolutely.
is trying to be sold to me, right? And not always sold from like dollars and cents, but sometimes sold as like, oh, this is other thing I have to buy into, right? And
Mhm.
I think that you really hit it really well with, like, I just was on your website right now, like the color, the font, the way that it's presented is so strong in the sense of like, this is the site I want to stay on and read and learn more about because of the tone, because of the imagery that's there. And then obviously like the general messaging, which I think is just phenomenal. So is this work that you started, like this branding concept, like this skill that you obviously have? It is was this something that you did well into your time in the classroom? Or was that something like maybe you were doing it and a few years later you were at Cami? Like how long have you been at this, and what maybe what happened in your own mind for you to pivot in that way, being a teacher in the classroom, if that makes sense?
Absolute sense, Steve. I think it was the realization that the students, the work that we do with the students and the work that we do as teachers deserve a platform. So, and I think it's more of a global deserving focus that I wanted to implement. I realized right when I started teaching that the students that I'm working with, they are doing exceptional work. It encouraged me, again, coming back to the whole lifelong learning process, to delve in deeper, look at more technology tools, look at more ways to implement those technology tools. And then it was that magical moment when I realized that we need to share these stories about our students online. We need to share our stories. We need to share our work as teachers. And a great way, of course, to do that, I know you made mention of the website, is to create your own website. So it is so important. I always tell teachers, you need to get yourself out there. So instead of creating a static curriculum vitae or CV or resume, create your own website. And I know that a lot of teachers might think, but it's very like technical. It's like a lot of hard work, coding work, and all of those things. But technology is so amazing nowadays that you've got so many incredible tools available to you. I mean, one example is Google Sites that you can use to build an online presence. So I think it is just also like me in the classroom, realizing that the work that we do as teachers are really important. It deserves a stage. And it's not only about, like you mentioned earlier, you go onto the internet, you are inundated with advertisements here and there. It's not about advertising and showcasing or selling your talents. It's really about showcasing the amazing work through a beautiful and impactful message, and then igniting passion amongst other teachers to then do the same. Because teachers, you've got to like spread your message. You've got to like add your amazing work on a stage. So it really started in school. And I actually, when I was still teaching, I actually encouraged my students already from a young age in primary school already. We spoke about the importance of them creating their own brands as well. So we used to do problem-based learning activities, and then students, for example, had to obviously create their own problems. They took ownership of their own learning. So, and then I said, okay, so what is it? Your thinking is absolutely wonderful. So what is a great way to showcase your thinking and create your own brand? And a lot of students created websites. They created their own apps as well in the classroom. So from a young age, students already, that's the impact and the power that we have as teachers, is to already ignite that passion and that importance of a personal brand amongst our students as well. So it really, really started in school. And like I said, the realization that teachers, we as teachers are doing fantastic work, and realizing the importance of sharing that work, showcasing that work on a platform like your own website is like truly, truly spectacular.
Frankie, I love your brain. And the reason why I say that is because like I knew, and I was listening intently, I promise you, but like the next question that I had, like that came to mind, like my own curiosity was like, what's the role of the students with all this? And you just said it, like without even me having to ask. And so I do love that problem-based, as you know, I'm a PBL person. I love it. And you know, like taking that problem-based strategy, but coupling it with a student brand for networking purposes, for global collaboration purposes, like, you know, relative to ISTE standards, for those that are familiar with that. And I just love the fact that you were able to like mesh a lot of things together, what seems like in a very seamless way. And so you're teaching branding, like you were teaching branding in the classroom, and in turn you were teaching, I would imagine, entrepreneurship in the classroom as well. And what it sounds like at a really young age, right? And I think to me that's like probably the most impressive part about this, because I was doing similar work as you. Like I don't know if I would say like it was identical, but the global collaboration, the entrepreneurship, using things like design thinking, right? But I was teaching seniors, and I remember like having conversations with 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-old students who are like, oh, I've never had a teacher ask me to think or work in this way in a classroom. But what you're doing, you're starting it so young. And to me, that's super impressive. What kind of, if you can speak to maybe like, what like outcomes did you see? Like maybe like success stories of teaching in this way with your students?
So and the number one thing was a boost in confidence. Students, and it comes back to what you just said now, a lot of students are sometimes taken aback when you give them a challenge like that. They're like, okay, so don't usually ask me to develop a website or to develop an app. but it really is fulfilling to have seen like the confidence boost among students, and then the initiative taking aspect as well. So that encouraged students to reach out to external sources as well. I had students that reached out to government agencies, that successfully set up meetings with government agencies. And then, of course, that was an opportunity for them to document that, build it into their apps, and then, of course, showcase their work with the whole school. What I did was actually, after the whole PBL project, when they built their websites and they built their applications, we actually organized or arranged a special what do you call it now? I'm looking for the English word. It's going to come now. Assembly. We had a special assembly for our students. So sorry, I had to look for that word. We had a special assembly where students actually showcase their apps and their websites. So through that, they realized the importance of having an online brand, showcasing my work online. And then, like I said, the valuable aspect is that confidence boost.
Yeah. And I think what's really, really good about all this too is that you have your brand, like you had it. And I would imagine, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that you modeled your website. Be like, hey, this is what I did. Almost like here's where you can go with this, right? And maybe it doesn't have to be. It's like not a branding in my head is not a one size fits all kind of thing in terms of how you do it, but it's good that you were modeling what that could look like for them and maybe give them inspiration, right? Because that can be the challenge with PBL, whether it's project based or problem based. A lot of times students they're like, wait, where's the rubric, or where's the example? I'm like, nah, the example is whatever you want it to be, right? Whatever you want to make. Use flex in like your own creativity. And the fact that you had that for them, I would imagine was quite powerful.
Absolutely. And also, Steve, when you build your brand as a teacher, especially when you start out, I think it's also very important that you share that journey with your students, because students are sometimes some of the most honest people that you get. So as I was developing, like I mentioned earlier, I started my whole website development and looked into branding when I was still teaching, because I wanted to share the student stories and my journey as an educator. So I often reached out to my students during an e-learning lesson. I asked them, okay, guys, let's look at my about page. What do you think about the about page? What would you have changed if you had to create your own website like this? You had to build your own brand. You had to tell your story to the world. What would you have said? Do you think that worked? And a lot of valuable things came out of that session. And then again, it comes down to the subconscious learning aspect as well. Students looked at it, they gave their feedback, and then subconsciously, they are learning about building a brand from a very young age.
That's okay. So that's a really good point. Because when I was still in the classroom, I was not obviously working at Cami yet, but from my students' perspective, it felt like I was, because I'd done a couple of virtual conferences for them, which is all like, Cami does a wonderful job with the branding and the marketing. And so like, my face was on it. And I was also on their podcast, right? There was a podcast at the time. And so like my students they were like, wait, we can Google Martinez and we'll find him very easily. And so like that kind of changes like the dynamic too, where, back in the day, or maybe even still, like some teachers are like, oh, I'm just a teacher, right? Which that kind of mentality should just go away altogether. Absolutely. If it's still around. But like my students look at it like, no, he's not just a teacher. He's somebody that is making a difference. His voice is out there. He's helping other teachers, even though he's in the classroom himself. And so that again, I didn't think about that at the time. Right. And Frankie, you're helping me grow in terms of like reflecting on my time in the classroom and leaving. But like students pay attention to that brand, especially like if you can be Googled at all, You will be Googled by
Mhm.
your kids. And so to me, that's it used to be an interesting talking point of where like my
Mhm.
kids would be curious, like, wait, what is a Cami hero? And what does that mean? And
Mhm.
do they pay you? Like all these like interesting, wonky little questions and curiosities that they have. And a lot of these kids now are adults, right? Because I did teach
Mhm.
older kids. So they actually, some of them follow me on LinkedIn and kind of follow my story, going back to the story,
Mhm.
right? And how important that
Mhm.
is. So Frankie, I have to ask, like, so from like, this whole build that we've had, this discussion on
Mhm.
branding, um, what about the network of it, right? And so like we
Mhm.
just spent a good majority of time talking about like how it impacted students, but how did it impact you professionally as an educator? You're obviously working at an ed tech company now. It looks like you've done your fair share of speaking, winning awards. What was the role of your brand with all that?
It played a central point, Steve. So if I did not decide, if I did not take that step and I didn't decide to build my brand, nobody would have known who I was. If I had to like live in a little cocoon and I had to just do what I wanted to do and I believed I did a great job. By the way, if you build an online brand and you share your work and you listen to feedback, that's another opportunity for you to improve. So the only
Mm,
way to improve your brand continuously online and your presence online is to get it out there and to listen to feedback. So the amount of doors, Steve, that my brand is, or personal brand, or teacher brand in this case, has opened up for me is just incredible. I mean, if I think about the Mail and Guardian Award, if I didn't have a presence as a teacher online, the Mail and Guardian, which is a large newspaper in South Africa, would not have known about my brand, and so many other educators that also won in my category as well with me. So that's number one. And also, if I think back to our Newsroom Africa interview that we had, television interview that we had as well, people are not going to know about you if you don't decide as a teacher to take that step and to really get your personal brand out there. I can't even describe to you in words how valuable that is. So you've got to start somewhere. And I always like think about this because a lot of teachers, like I mentioned earlier, they think that I can't do website design and I don't know how to tell my story. But I would really encourage teachers to really think, what are you really passionate about? And that thing or concept or topic that you are really passionate about, how can it positively affect communities? How can you spread that word online? Whether it's through a website, whether it's through a podcast, a weekly podcast. You also have a very beautiful Under the Hat website as well, by the way, Steve. Your
oh,
brand is
thank you.
also on point. So it's like deciding just to take that step. And then what I always tell teachers when I talk about branding and they ask me questions about branding, like where do I start? I always say, like, always remember this quote by Julia Carney: little drops of water make the mighty ocean. So it's not about taking that big step right at the beginning. It's like a culmination of smaller steps that lead into something bigger. And then I think the reward, like beyond that, is like the doors that it opens for you, the networking opportunities that it opens for you, because people now know, okay, so Steve is interested in PBL. Look at the difference that Steve is making in terms of PBL with his students. So that allows you to then seek other networking opportunities with like-minded individuals. So really, really, the importance of a teacher brand, it cannot be ignored. It, like, if you haven't started creating your teacher brand, you've got to start now. You've got to get yourself out there, because I guarantee you opportunities, doors will open for you, and then continue improving your brands. But like I said, the most important thing is start somewhere and those doors will open.
It and that's the way you put all that, Frankie, is so inspiring
Mm,
for those that are scared, right? But I think now, as much as it feels like the internet is a very busy place, because it is, there's also a lot of like, there's more options it's more accessible depending on like who you are. Like I'm her name's escaping me, but there's a young teacher, like she was probably like only 2-3 years in the profession, and she just started making TikToks. But really, like her brand was really like the reality of teaching. Like she would spend time talking about like, oh, the behavior, or talking about the grading, and it was like, but she was actually very funny. Like that's the thing. It was like, I'm like, oh, girl, you need to be doing stand up like that. That's like that was kind of like you, Frankie. Like you're just like, she's just keen to make people laugh because of the silly things that we encounter as teachers, right? But I think the other, maybe possibly like, the other roadblock is, this fear of like, I'm not going to get the likes, or I'm not going to get this, the subscribers that I want. And I remember like leading into starting this show, my good friend from Maya Tech Life, Alfonso, beautiful human. He like, he helped me out with conversations like this of like, Steve, you just start the podcast. Like you have a good idea of what it's going to be and what the intent is. And he was just like, start it, but don't even look at the analytics. Like, don't even look at the likes. Like, who cares? What's going to be important is A, are you having a good time? And B, are people coming on to your show and allowing you to grow as a teacher, as a trainer, as a person, right? And so that was the best advice I think he could have given me, because it allowed me, it empowered me. Like, you know what? I do need to just start this, right? So Frankie, what are your tips in terms of like, you kind of touched on this a bit, but for somebody, a teacher, an administrator, anyone, they don't have their brand yet. They want one. They're kind of listening. They hear the value in it. What are some tips on how to start logistically, but also like maybe aesthetically as well?
I think a lot of times, Steve, when people think of a personal branding, although very important, they immediately think of a logo, and they immediately think of the aesthetic spot, as you mentioned earlier. Sure. But I think the most important thing, and a way for you to start as a teacher, before we get into the logistical aspects, is really deciding what you are passionate about. And you touched upon it earlier so beautifully. If you are not going to enjoy it, like your friend Alfonso asked you, the most important thing is, are you enjoying it? If you're not enjoying it, your message is not going to come across authentically. So it's deciding what you are really, really passionate about that can make a difference. And it must be something that really is authentic to you. So don't look at other people's likes. Don't see, okay, that person got 1,000 likes for like doing something about PBL, for example. I'm just using that as an example. Yeah. So because that person got so many likes, I'm also going to do something around PBL. But you're not interested in PBL at all. So it's really, the first step is to identify the authentic thing in education that you are really passionate about. And then it is very important that you start doing research. Look at other people, look at other influencers, and really, really reach out to them. So it doesn't matter if it's a teacher, like you said, the teacher that showcases all the real life problems, what teachers are going through. Even if that teacher or that person that has a strong personal brand has 15,000 followers or 40,000 followers, nothing stops you from reaching out. So I think the next important thing is, after you decided what your interest is to reach out to a network. Look at what other people are doing. Look for things that you are interested as well. So if you are interested in digital citizenship, showcasing your powerful work that you are doing with your students through your personal brand with regards to digital citizenship, look for other people in the education community who are doing great things around digital citizenship. Try and reach out to them. Try to connect with them. Arrange a meeting with them. You're not going to know. It's always going to be no unless you try. So identify your interest. Reach out to someone in the edtech or the education community, and then ask them questions, ask them for tips. And then the third thing that I would say in terms of your personal branding, in terms of the aesthetic spot, is your aesthetic spot is like the cherry on top. So it's the very last thing that you are going to do. So then you can start looking at tools, free tools. We've got the amazing Canva as well that you can use to design your branding elements. Research, download brand guides as examples. YouTube is another powerful platform that you can use to learn how to build websites. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a coded website. You can start off by using a Google site. If you decide to go onto the WordPress route as well, and you use plugins like Divi, for example, there are a ton of free courses. And then I think it is also very, very important to go to events as well. That's another great logistical thing. The other day, a teacher actually asked a question. Okay, so I understand what the importance of a personal brand is, but I can't afford to go to events right now. I can't pay to attend events. And then my response was, but keep on looking. There's so many free events, worldwide events, that will enable you to connect with communities, not only in your own country, but truly on a global level. So the next step is really like finding that network, finding people that really, really can help you build your brand, people that you can learn from. If you don't connect with them like live, if they've got a personal brand, I'm sure they're going to have some videos that you can learn from. So it's really finding that network to learn from as well. And then, like I said, aesthetics, lots of design tools, lots of free tools. So, but like I said, keep in mind, aesthetics later on. That's the cherry on top. We always think like start with the logo, start with the aesthetics. Very important, but understand what your message is, what thing that you are passionate about, you want to convey.
It's so wonderful having your brain on the show to talk this out selfishly, I'm going to say, which is with me alone, because like, I felt like a lot of like what you're suggesting, I did for this show, but not on purpose, more like on accident, right? Like I did have the under the hat concept. Like that was like what I did first when I did the logoing, like the aesthetic, as you say, like that was one of the last things that I did, but I don't know how much I was paying attention to that. I was just stumbling your way, right? And I guess for anyone like listening, I get DMs all the time. People be like, Steve, really like the show, really appreciate the content. The conversations are super authentic and meaningful. And so that brings me a lot of joy. And like, you know, I feel like I still have a lot to learn. I have a lot of growing to do still as a podcaster, but it's okay to just figure it out while you're doing it, right? That whole idea of building that plane, you're flying it. And I'm really glad that I did a few things right based on what I'm hearing, but not intentionally, I don't think, but more of just like, that's the way that it turned out. So Frankie, we're kind of to that point in the show where, you know, we're going to unpack that big question. Like, and so the one question that gets asked on the show is, you know, what is top of mind for you right now in education? You are in a like myself, in an interesting context within education, in the sense of, you know, you're talking to a lot of different people, you're talking to a lot of teachers, and I know, like in your case, you might be talking to teachers in various countries, right? So, you know, kind of what you're hearing, kind of what you're seeing, what you're feeling, like what is top of mind right now? Like what is something that's keeping you up at night with what's going on in education, or maybe something that you're excited about?
I'm not going to say AI. I am excited about AI, Steve. Absolutely love AI. But I think it's that community aspect right now that's very, very important in education. And I think like that encompasses so many different things in education, because through community building, we can come together to innovate in terms of AI, in terms of whatever we are interested in education. So for me, it is that community, that support, thriving off of each other through support. So the empowerment aspect, of course, that's always been very important and still is on top of mine today, still the upliftment, the empowerment part. And it's really, really that community building, because I think today more than ever, with what is going on in the world, what our students are seeing in the media, what is currently going on, it's so important to highlight that community aspect, and also understanding that the technological aspect in terms of community building plays such a crucial role, because through technology we can connect with global audiences and support each other, because as humans we thrive off of that support. And that is really what is needed in education right now, is coming together through community involvement, but utilizing technology to really, really make that happen.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Just that level of collaboration, using that
Mhm.
creativity to build that community, right? And we're stronger together. And so, yeah, that resonates with me. I just want to point out that, if you're listening, if you're watching, big shout out to Frankie for coming on the show. I do want to, plug some of the stuff. Like we did mention Frankie's beautiful website. Um, frankiecilliers.com.
Okay.
Visit it. I was there earlier.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Frankie is just the vibe. And when you get on that website, like you'll understand what I mean. It is the vibe. And so Frankie's also very active on social media. Uh, you know, so you can find him. And I believe Frankie, the Frankie Cilliers, like that's for all of them, right? For the X, Instagram. Yeah.
That's
And,
perfect.
and yep. So yeah, so definitely connect with Frankie. If you have any questions for him, I know, I know for a fact that he is more than willing to answer any questions, anything that maybe is top of mind, anything you didn't get out of this episode from a branding perspective or just general education. And I know that Frankie is here for it. For everybody else that has been really committed listening to the show, we are coming up towards the end of this season. So feel free, if you do need to do a catch up. I know I have a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm catching up on the show, but Steve, loving it. Underhatpod.com. That's where you can catch all of the socials, all of the episodes. And, that's where you can get on YouTube, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Super active on the X, on the Twix, as we say, as the kids are saying. So feel free to connect with me there. And friends, this has been a lot of fun. Frankie, I really appreciate you jumping on today.
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me. And your brand is on point. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you, Frankie. And as always, friends, keep your hats on, but your minds open. Until next time.